with the jacket. And he's like, and I quote.
There's two of them. Now
I'll talk about you before I put this on. Like this shirt is 23 years old. This T-shirt, maybe 30, and it looks bad. But at least I thought it's not like it's I'm just deliberately trying to be incredibly informal.
But the thing is, with your shirt, like, people will buy their shirt to look like that. You know? Like, Haas will spend hours of his day distressing his shirt to look like that.
Well, I've spent decades distressing my shirt. I've got that covered. Anyway, so...
I bought this shirt in college, actually, so it's 35 years old.
Wow!
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, so we're going to get the story. So one second. So the valet says, look, I don't think I could pull it off, and he's a good-looking young guy. He's like, I don't think I could pull it off, but you nailed it. He's like, that's a good look. And I thought, I can't wait to tell Anna on air and have her go, which is kind of what's happening.
I mean, I would be ecstatic if I were you getting that type of validation from another dude instead of, a woman who knows her fashion. But anyway, nonetheless.
But he was a stylish young man. He was. All right, anyways, let's move forward.
All right. Health Secretary Tom Price has resigned.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Down goes Price. Down goes Price.
Now, he resigned about an hour after Donald Trump dressed him down, and we have a clip to prove it. Take a look.
Well, see, I mean, we have, he's a very fine man, but we're gonna make a decision sometime tonight. He's a very, very fine man. Well, we have great secretaries, and we have some that actually own their own planes, as you know, and that solves that. But we put it in order that no more planes. If you look at past administrations, for instance, if you look at the Obama administration and you take a look at the amount of time that they spent in the air, they spent a lot of time in the air. But I felt very badly because Secretary Price is a good man. But we are looking into it, and we're looking into it very strongly. Well, we'll take a look. I'll be announcing something in the pretty near future.
I mean, the guy is unbelievable, man.
Yeah, okay. We're looking into it very strongly. We're looking into it. What does that mean?
Hey, what's going on?
Quiet! I'm looking into it! And really, really strongly. Okay, the previous administration spent a lot of time in the air.
Wow. Yeah. If you look at it, the previous administration spent a lot of time in the air. I mean, I haven't looked at it. No one has.
Right.
Yeah.
And that means, no, they didn't use private planes, but they had to travel because they worked for the government, and they spent a lot of time in the air. Okay. Recently, we've got a lot of good secretaries. We got a lot of good secretaries.
I can't.
Come on, this guy. You voted for this guy. All right.
Also, just the as he said, I'll probably be signing an executive order, which we did this week. I'll probably be signing, I might be signing an executive order. Like, hey, man, let us know when you do. Right? I don't need to know. I might be doing a lot of things today, right? But if I do them, I'll tell you. And here again, I'll probably don't tell us you're going to decide on Tom Price tonight. You decide, and then you let us know. It's a simple process.
And normally, all this would have been considered incredibly unacceptable because you're leaving the guy, to die out there. And it sounds like I'm going to decide. That's crazy. You make a decision before you go public, because if you go public, it looks terrible. It looks not only terrible for Tom Price, but it looks terrible for you because you look so disorganized. But I guess he's
weak.
That's right. And he's so used to looking like a clown. He's like, what do you mean the red bulbous nose? I always have that on. Squeeze the water from the lapel. I mean, speaking of water, you hear what he said about Puerto Rico? He said, Puerto Rico. It turns out it's an island surrounded by water. Big water. Swear to God, he said big water.
No.
Ocean water.
Ocean water.
What else? What other kind of water would you be surrounded by if you're Puerto Rico?
So when he made those statements about Puerto Rico being an island that's surrounded by water, I immediately thought of how much crap Sarah Palin got when she told Katie Couric that she could see Russia from her house.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we have devolved as a country. At least during the Sarah Palin days, there was just a general consensus that, that's kind of unacceptable. You might be the VP. But now we have a president who says things like, Puerto Rico is an island surrounded by big water.
How Republicans don't take it. You got it now. It's 3 straight elections, really. I forgot about Palin. Take stock, man.
Yeah.
George W. Bush, Sarah Palin, Donald Trump.
Look, I got news for you. You're the dumb party.
That's right. You keep, and it's at the top of the party. Like, there are smart guys who are Republicans who we disagree with, right?
Yeah.
Right? And they have ideas for how government should shrink and then how it should work afterwards and what ways. Nobody would argue John Kasich is a dumb guy. I don't think anybody would argue Jeb Bush is a dumb guy. You know what? Some people would argue, but first of all, not on this level. Not at all.
Yeah,
When Jeb Bush was governor, no, it's not. It's not even close. He was governor. He made stuff work. We didn't like it. He made stuff work in a way that we didn't think worked. So there are, John Huntsman. There are tons and tons. But man, you guys just keep electing the dimmest bulbs in your closet to leave the party.
But that goes to a very important point, and then we're going to get to Price more thoroughly in a second. Is that, look, guys, it's not just the leadership; it's the voters. So you might find that more offensive. But you had 17 choices in that primary, and you chose the dumbest guy in the lot. You could have chosen John McCain in 2000. Back then, I was a Republican. I voted for John McCain in the primaries. But you chose the dumb guy. So I don't know what that says about you.
I tell you what, but I know what it says in general about the country. It's not just Republicans here, but I mean, we are not. We're not number one. We're not the best countries. I love my country. This is where I live. It's where I want to live, and I want it to be as great as it can. Many things. The idea of America is by far the best idea there is that we've had. But we keep doing dumb things. We've been doing dumb things, and we celebrate dumbness, and we celebrate guys who walk around and pee like a dog after they score a touchdown, and we celebrate people like George W. Bush and Donald Trump in the White House. And I apologize instantly to George W. Bush for including him in that sentence.
I know this is going to make the conversation a little longer, but I have to get this out of the way. I mean, think about the type of rhetoric that you would hear from the right during the past election in regard to education, right? In regard to knowing what you're talking about and providing data and facts to back up your arguments. You would immediately get cast off as elitist, because having evidence to back up the arguments you're making is somehow a bad thing that makes you an elitist. And there was just this outright rejection of logic and reason, and it drove me absolutely insane.
It's not temporary. It's not a little thing that made you insane. It's the direction the country's been going for 37 years now. And DeVos and Carson and Pruitt and Zinke and these guys.
You can't call her DeVos. That sounds way too cool.
Is it DeVos? Is it Betsy
DeVos?
Betsy DeVos.
DeVos.
I think it's DeVos. Yeah. Devo. That's an insult to Devo. They were a great band. And the clown who's the head of science at NASA now, right? I mean, that the guy with the 9 chins, right? And it's not a fair way. I mean, he's dumb, so I take back but just he's not a serious person. They're filled with nonsense. Can I read a couple of tweets that I think were valuable in regard to two things you mentioned? First of all, Michael Schur subtweeting the president's tweet about big water, big ocean, right? It's an island surrounded by big water, big ocean. Michael wrote, always pandering to big water. That's funny. People should run with it, retweet it. It's good stuff. And then today, before Tom Price got fired, Tony Perkins from the I Hate Family Council. This was never about Secretary Price's ethics. Never. It's about trying to discredit one of the most effective social conservatives in Washington. No, man. It was about the ethics. It was about the planes. And it was so scandalous that you couldn't not cover it.
$400,000 in taxpayer money going toward those private jet trips.
You pay $25,000 to fly to Philadelphia when a train takes 2 hours and costs $72. $172.
But it goes, by the way, real quick, I don't buy for a second that Trump decided, I think Trump forced him to resign, let's keep it real, but I don't buy for a second that it's over these chartered flights. I think it has everything to do with Trump being bitter about the fact that Tom Price couldn't do anything about healthcare, because does Trump ever care about ethics? Does Trump ever care about taxpayer money going toward, ridiculous, lavish travel for, his cabinet members?
Well,
hell no.
We won't know until we hear something from somebody in the White House, but there could be some truth to that. I suspect it's subtler than that, but you're probably... There certainly could be something to it, is that Trump wouldn't want to fire Price to call attention, because that instantly just calls attention to Trump's failure on healthcare. You picked the guy to do it, and he couldn't do it. So he's, I'm sure, disappointed in healthcare, and he likes holding people responsible who really aren't responsible. So he holds Tom Price responsible, and now Tom Price walks into something, and he's like, oh, I can fire him now.
No. There's significant reports that not only the things that he said publicly, but that privately Trump is mad at Tom Price for not getting Trump care passed and repealing and replacing Obamacare. And of course, publicly, he once joked at a rally. He pointed to Price, who was on stage with him. He said, "He better get them, otherwise I'll say, Tom, you're fired."
That was at the Boy Scouts rally.
Yes, Boy Scouts rally, the Jamboree.
Yeah. And then he was very clear that he was joking. He did this, like, "Oh, you know me."
Right.
Yeah.
But again, the internal reporting indicated that he wasn't joking. And so let's break that down. Number one, he's a clown. He doesn't know how government works. So your Department of Health and Human Services Secretary is important, but can they rally the votes needed in the Senate? It's not exactly the right. Like, first of all, they can't do it unilaterally. Of course not. That's preposterous. Do you have the votes or you don't have the votes? And can they craft the legislation? Not really. And if anyone is going to twist arms to get votes, what power does the guy at HHS have? It's either the president or Mitch McConnell that gets it done or doesn't get it done. So to weirdly blame your health secretary, basically, is to misunderstand the process. It's, if I have a bad day on air, it's to turn to our accountant and go, "Why didn't you do a better talk show today?"
Yeah.
I mean, if he screwed up the accounting, then I would say that's his fault.
Well, it's almost like requiring the accountant to raise money. Mm-hmm. Like the accountant manages the money you bring in, but I was like, I don't go raise money. I don't raise money. I make sure that you have enough money to operate. You don't break the law. That's my job.
That's a perfect analogy, Ben. Thank you for making mine better, because that's what dumb people do who don't understand what an accountant does. The accountant doesn't raise money. The accountant tracks the money you have. The Secretary of Health and Human Services doesn't go do a whip count in Congress and pass a bill and make sure it has the right legislation or provisions in it. He applies that, right? Once it passes, then it's his job to make sure that it's applied right. Could they have a small role in whipping people, especially because he came from the House and maybe he knows some colleagues that are right-wing and he convinces them? Well, sure, a little bit, right?
One of the reasons why Trump picked so many members of Congress is because he was hoping that would sort of have some Svengali-like effect on their ability to persuade their colleagues. But Tom Price was in the House, and he doesn't have any sway at all in the Senate, and I suspect senators would resent it. If Tom Price had been intricately involved in crafting the healthcare legislation, he's an orthopedic surgeon, or physician anyway, could he have had some role there? But he doesn't, because all they wanted to do was repeal Obamacare. There was never a cohesive plan. Obamacare, the right likes to claim, was rammed through. There were 18 months of public hearings on Obamacare. Yeah. It wasn't even vaguely rammed through. It didn't pass with any Republican support in the end, but it wasn't rammed through in any way. All of these were rammed through in a period of months without having any legislation at all. When Trump came in, they fired bill after bill after bill. They're just little tricks. That's what it is always. They're tricks designed to make you think that they're passing something when all they wanted to do was repeal. So even the idea that Tom Price could have been involved in crafting legislation, there was no legislation. Tom Price didn't want that legislation when he was in the House. He didn't want it at HHS. And what he would have been in charge of, last thing, of course, is implementing whatever law you passed. That would have been his task at HHS.
And then finally, the second misunderstanding here is, okay, so he spent $400,000 on planes, and he said, well, don't worry, I'll give you back a little less than $52,000 for the price of my seat on a plane.
On the price of a business class ticket on a plane.
Right. But to be fair to Tom Price, I don't know that he's got $400,000. And besides which, all Tom Price cares about is money, right?
He's worth $14 million.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, He should have
given it.
He's one of the, as you might imagine, one of the poorer members of Trump's cabinet, but he's worth $14 million.
Drain the swamp.
Right. So you remember, how he's not a criminal, I don't quite know. He advocated the legislation to boost companies that he had a personal investment in.
Well, that's partly what I was getting at. So they talk about, drain the swamp, but, you wasted government resources. They claim Trump was mad about that, and the elites going around in private planes, that's not draining the swamp. No. There's much bigger problems with draining the swamp. So first of all, Tom Price did, in essence, insider trading with information he had as a congressman that the rest of us didn't have. And they had to pass a whole law to make sure you couldn't keep doing what Tom Price was consistently doing in the House. Oh, good, I got some information you don't know. I'm going to go trade on that. That's part of how he made the money in the first place. That's the swamp. Trump already knew that when he selected Tom Price. So this is actually a molehill compared to the mountain of corrupt dealings that Tom Price in the past, which Trump loved and had selected him. Like, oh, that's savvy, way to cheat the American public. And then talking about saving money or not saving money. Look, 400,000 is terrible, and he shouldn't have done it. But Trump today announced a bill that would cost us trillions of dollars, and those are tax cuts that would go to the richest people in the country, to the corporations who are Trump's donors. That's the swamp.
And
trillions is the swamp, not that $400,000 on the plane.
Yeah, and Trump's plan, which would actually hurt people who earn between $150,000 and $300,000 a year, which is a nice, great twist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's because those are people almost least likely to support Trump. Like, you know, it's like they're kind of rich, but they're smart. No, they got a little rich, but they're smart enough to know that that guy's a bozo. And there's no partisanship here. Like, I think what Tom Price did, just on I don't know the law specifically, and Tom Price probably skillfully got around the law. Maybe, right? But certainly this administration is not looking at it, but as far as I know, any U.S. attorney either. Hopefully that'll change. But what Tom Price did is more galling to me than what Bob Menendez did. And Bob Menendez is probably going to go to prison. Mm-hmm. And there's nobody on this panel who thinks he shouldn't, right? Like Bob Menendez appears to be, if proven, and if they get this far in federal court, they usually have the goods. But Bob Menendez, that's criminal behavior, right? Mm-hmm. And so if it's a Democrat, they go. If it's a Republican, they go. And you're right. And Trump knew this when he hired Tom Price. It's not that he overlooked it; he's totally indifferent to it. It's just that's business. He had a chance to make some money. He knew this bill was coming. So he invested in the company. Good thinking.
Yep. All right, what's next?
All right. Donald Trump has begun his national tour touting his proposal to cut taxes. And you will hear from his cabinet members where they say that they're not going to cut taxes for the wealthy. They're only going to focus on the middle class. Well, interesting choice that Trump made when he decided to go speak to manufacturers. And he said the following.
My administration is working every day to lift the burdens on our companies and on our workers so that you can thrive, compete, and grow. And at the very center of that plan is a giant, beautiful, massive, the biggest ever in our country, tax cut.
Giant, massive, beautiful.
He sounded like he was doing more of that locker room talk. Like that he was with his friends, like, oh, you should see it. It's giant. It's beautiful. Right. But that is how he sees tax cuts. Like, gotta hit that.
Right.
But my favorite part of that is all this time the Republicans have, and actually a lot of the establishment, including Democrats, people on TV, have not been calling it tax cuts. They're more savvy than that. They call it tax reform. Yep. Wink. No, it's not going to affect the deficit. No, this isn't tax cuts for the rich. We're just reforming taxes, right? And Trump has nobody gave him the memo. And even if he gave him the memo, he wouldn't read it.
No, there was, I forget where he made this statement. It was from last week, but he was speaking to Republicans, and he said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he did say this, stop calling it tax reform, it's tax cuts. Just call it what it is.
Yeah.
And it's like, first of all, I think that type of transparency is actually something that his base loves. And I know he's not being transparent for the sake of being transparent. It's an accident. But I appreciate it too, right? Because we need to hear what it really is instead of like some tactful, shady, slimy politician pretending like, oh, we're going to reform the system and simplify it so you're not as confused and you save a little bit of money. No, he wants tax cuts for the wealthy. Members of his cabinet, though, are going around and saying, no, Gary Cohn, his economic advisor, for instance, is saying it's not tax cuts for the wealthy. We're just looking out for the middle class. But think about who he's speaking to. He's speaking to the National Association of Manufacturers. So these are the people who are either automating their jobs or shipping their jobs overseas. And Trump's argument is, well, if we just cut their taxes, we can bring those jobs back to the United States. But case study after case study shows that that's actually not the case. What they do is they will take their savings from these tax cuts and they'll do acquisitions or they'll buy shares of their own company. And I have some proof of that. So let's go to it. Let's go to graphic 3. So First, let's get to the details of the plan when it comes to corporations. The plan would lower the corporate tax rate from 35% to 20% and would lower the rate for so-called pass-through businesses to 25%.
Just pause there for a second. I just want to explain that for a second. So that is a big, beautiful tax cut for multinational corporations that donate to politicians. But the pass-through part is very important because that affects Donald Trump personally. So instead of paying 39.6%, let's call it 40, right? But instead of paying 40%, he brings it down to 25%. That could save him hundreds of millions of dollars.
Pass-throughs are at 39.6?
Yeah.
So no, normally if you're running a business and you just pay personal taxes on it, you're paying and he would be theoretically at the highest rate, so he'd pay 40%. But if you do a pass-through business, now they're saying, well, since it's a business, I'm going to knock that down to 25%. So he just saved 15% on his taxes. So on that, he won't be transparent, and every once in a while he'll lie and say, oh, this doesn't affect me at all. All of his businesses are pass-through businesses.
Right.
If he's telling the truth about the amount of money that he has, he's saving billions. He just cut his own taxes by billions. Even if he's lying, he's still saving tens to hundreds of millions of dollars by doing this. So it is incredibly self-aggrandizing, this plan.
Yeah, that's why those conflict of interest debates that were happening right after his inauguration were important. And, you know, he is using his position in office to benefit himself and his own businesses. But I don't know. I guess his supporters don't really care too much.
I'm only half joking. But do you think he knows what the middle class is? Like, maybe, and maybe he thinks Tom Price is the middle class because, you know, one reason why I think when I first saw, you know, how his tax plan worked, which is really upside down on people, I think between 1 and 300,000 or 150 to 300,000 a year, is that he almost has, like, if you make that much, why don't you make more? Right? And him, like somebody with $14 million, the low end of his cabinet, you know, as he said, many of my cabinet members they own their own jets. So it's not a problem. Right?
Yeah,
they have lots of great secretaries.
Right. I'm pretty sure that most of the cost, by the way, is fuel and personnel. And right. So, like maybe he literally thinks like a middle class. He has disdain for people with $10, $12 million a year. Like who has $10 or $12 million a year? By next year, you should have $25 million. If anything is going on. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, I'm half joking, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could ask Donald Trump if he was forced to tell the truth. Where's the middle class? What do they make?
No. Somebody should definitely ask him that. There's no way he's not going to be right by an order of magnitude.
Right.
He probably thinks middle class is like $1 million.
Yeah, I don't know, 750,000 to 1.5 million, something like that a year.
Yeah. Oh, please, somebody ask him. Anyways, so let's keep going on the details.
All right, so now let's get to what these big corporations plan to do with these tax cuts. This is based on, their responses to survey questions, okay? Let's go to graphic 5. 65% of these respondents said that tax reform, or these tax cuts, would make them more likely to expand their businesses, and about 57% said the tax reform would make them more likely to hire more workers. Now, they're not saying that they will. They said that, sure, it makes me more likely, only 57%. I mean, think about how much we're sacrificing in revenue just in taxpayer money that helps fund these programs that we need. Think about how much we're sacrificing on the small chance that some of these corporations will consider creating more jobs.
And because sorry, real quick, we think about this on such a small scale. We think of that. So there's a guy in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and he owns a lumber yard, right? And he does well, makes $1.5 million a year. His company's profitable. That's the only thing Republicans want to talk about, because they'll say that guy gets a big tax cut, and maybe instead of employing 86 workers, he can add that other thing and another shift, and he can employ 104 workers, right? And to do more business, and he's created more jobs. That's how it's supposed to work, right? But we're not talking about those guys. That's great if that happens. But that guy's not going to get bought by another company, nor is he going to buy another company. This is people who employ 86,000 people, and then they merge with a company that has 71,000 people, and then together they have 100,000, so they fire 57,000 people.
Yeah, that happens all the time.
These giant multinational corporations, what they do is they say right before the tax cuts, oh my God, we're going to expand workers, and I'm surprised only 57%. If they were savvy, 97% of them would say, oh yeah, Yeah, more workers. That's what we're going to do. Sure. But in reality, when you go and double check what they've actually done, is what Anna was referring to earlier. They acquire another company and they go, great, synergies. So we're going to have cost efficiencies. That means I fire half of your accounting staff and half of my accounting staff, and now we just have an accounting staff that's half the size, let alone manufacturing, etc. And the other thing they do is stock buybacks.
Yes. That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable. They buy shares of their own company to increase the stock value of their own company for their freaking investors.
Now look, let me explain.
No. Makes me so mad.
Okay, so if you're wondering, you're supposed to raise the stock price for your shareholders. Isn't that what a CEO is supposed to do? Well, kind of. Part of the reason they're increasing the stock price is because they have bonuses and options.
Yeah.
So they will exercise their options at the higher stock price and make more money personally. So now, and even if you say, hey, that's great, I want them to make even more money as the CEO, okay, God bless, but it's not doing what they said they were going to do, which is to hire more American workers, so understand what's going on. And you can increase, the real way to increase shareholder value is to have a better company. So to have when more investment might lead to a company that's worth more in the long run. The buybacks are more of a short-term exercise, usually tied to their own bonus.
Everything we have in the last 40 years is short-term, maybe longer, right? And we think about this wrong, and we didn't always think about it this way. Yes, you have a fiduciary responsibility to your stockholders. You don't have a fiduciary responsibility to your stockholders to increase their margin of return at the expense of X number of workers who you fire. You don't. And we didn't always think that way. I don't know whether we had rules in place to prevent it or whether we just thought, no, I'm invested in this company and I get a pretty healthy 2% rate of return, right? 2.5%. Sometimes I lose. Some years I get 4, right? But now all we do is chase money. When I was arguing with, I have a couple of, in the last 3 years, gotten some super rich friends, right? A couple of them are friends, but and they're reasonable guys. They vote Republican because they've always, I think, voted Republican, and they want their taxes cut, and they talk about and they worry about socialism. They're incredibly kind, decent, charitable guys, right? But they do acknowledge that there's been a mind shift change, that over the last 30 years, the desire to get that rate of return, to deliver the way Bernie Madoff delivered, that's all they think about, that becomes paramount, as opposed to, you know what, I'm going to have a company that grows at a reasonable percentage and keeps this town afloat, and then I'm going to die, and that's going to be fine.
So I'm definitely the most conservative on this panel on this issue, and I think that wanting to increase your rate of return is a fairly normal thing to do. I think that there is a point at which greed kicks in and you become counterproductive. And I actually had this conversation just yesterday with Ray Dalio, who is literally one of the richest men alive. Go check that out on youtube.com/TYT interviews. A really interesting conversation about greed and marginal utility, etc. But so I don't mind them trying to increase their rate of return, and maybe to one where others might be uncomfortable. But what I do mind is you telling us you need $1.5 trillion in tax cuts, which then is not going to let our kids get an education, highways, etc. And then you say it's because you're going to hire workers, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
You're not going to hire more workers. You're going to try to increase your rate of return, which I think you have every right to do, but not at taxpayer expense and not through lying to the public.
And I'm not going to pass a law which says you can't really go for it, right, under the Mankiewicz administration. I'm just saying we should recognize to what extent greed has motivated us. And it should bother us, and we should at least think about it. That's all. But so to your last point there, Cenk, about not hiring workers, and Anna's initial point about not hiring workers, let's look at those numbers. So 57% say they're going to hire workers. So that means 43%, they may not have all said they weren't, but they didn't answer yes. So 43%. So those guys, they're definitely not going to hire workers, right? I mean, they've said no, right? Of the 57%, as you say, if they were savvy, they'd just say yes. Some of them will realize afterwards, oh no, we have to hire more workers because I said in a survey that I hire more workers. So the tax cuts, which are designed to hire workers, it's unquestionable that more than half, and I would say 2/3, if half of the 57% aren't going to do it, and all of the 43%, you're at 71%, aren't going to hire workers. It doesn't work, and we know it doesn't work because it's never worked. I mean, it might have worked if corporate tax rate was astronomically high, right?
Actually, that was when we had created the most.
Right, but that's when we were just cranking jobs out and hiring people.
And let me add last two things on this. Warren Buffett's absolutely right. And look, I run a chow business. I run a very, very, very small business compared to those guys. But he overall, I agree with him. And what he says is nobody ever goes and says, I'm going to start a business or I'm going to make an investment, but I won't do it if the taxes are too high. Right? You're an entrepreneur or whatever you are, you're a businessman, you're a finance person, and you're going to make money. Okay? And you worry about your taxes later. Now, of course, taxes have other financial implications, but overall, you're either going to do that business or you're not going to do that business, and you are a terrible business person if you're saying, oh, my marginal taxes are a little higher, and hence I won't go into it at all. It's just not true.
Republicans tell those stories. We hear them all the time. I have heard them. That people aren't going to expand their businesses because either it's too much paperwork.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
That's a big one.
How pathetic is that?
Okay, and by the way, if we want to streamline paperwork in a way that is effective, I got it. But what they really mean is, I don't want to comply with any regulation.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So comply with it. If you got money and you have a good idea for the business, I got to be honest, the 6 days extra of paperwork that you might have to do or some employee has to do shouldn't prevent you from doing it. And I never meet the actual person or read about the actual person. I was going to expand my business, but the taxes were too high and there was too much paperwork, so I decided not to.
Well, then you're a lazy, terrible businessman. So I know it's not just a matter of laziness. If you're, for example, you're a public corporation, you have to hire more people to make sure that you're complying with the law. But that's because we don't want people getting ripped off. Right. We don't want that you lying to them. So look, the last part of that is that if you want to know what they actually think, don't talk to them before the tax cuts when they're looking for the money, okay? Actually go to what they say to shareholders, because every quarter they have to announce what they're doing, etc. And there, they turn around and brag about how many jobs they've cut.
Yes.
Because then the shareholders go, that's really good, we saved a lot of money. So that's where and by the way, at that point, they legally must tell the truth, otherwise they would be in legal trouble because that affects their stock price. So all this is nonsense talk so they can just grab the money. Afterwards, look at what they say in those quarterly reports. You'll have your real answer. And we have looked in the past, and what they do is they cut jobs. Okay, you know what? I'm sorry. One more last economic point here. When the taxes are high, why might they hire more people rather than less people? Because if you're going to pay a lot of taxes, you don't want to take the money and income and pay those taxes. You'd rather keep them inside the company. And if you keep them inside the company, you're more likely to hire more people and grow your company.
It's a deduction, right? You get a deduction for employees because it's a business cost. I don't know. I could be wrong about that.
So that's very complicated. The overall point is you don't want to take the money out and pay taxes on it if the taxes are so high.
Right.
It's better to grow your company and have your company be worth more in the long run. Mm-hmm. So you keep the money inside the company and hire more people and grow it instead of just taking it out and getting a yacht and a mansion.
I would add something, but everything I know about economics was just used up in the last 6 minutes, literally all of it.
Okay, are we done?
Yeah, we got to take a break. When we come back, more stories, big, beautiful, giant, massive stories. So you don't want to miss it. Come right back.
I saw a picture of John. I was like, look at this fucking badass Viking he met on his trip. I was like, oh wait, that's John.
Yeah.
His beard is so gross. I swear to God, I didn't recognize him.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was like a dude from up there, like a Viking-looking dude from up there.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, we've got our own Viking. Look at Johnny Pie. Johnny Pie, we miss you, big guy. And he was at Svalbard. We were talking about how he was going to go get the grains if he's the last person on Earth, and he's going to, or among the last people on that ship, and repopulate the Earth after North Korea. At least he's got the grains. He knows where it is. He can find it. Mm-hmm. Don't worry. Humanity will be saved. Yet again, by a white male. John Idaho.
Hey, Cenk, what's up? And my VCR keeps flashing 12, but it's not even midnight. Go.
right, back on the Young Turks. The Mathematician writes, seriously though, love the old school power panel today for first hour. Chris Allen writes, I wear the Batman TYT shirt, and I've had some people recognize it in Manchester, England.
Oh, wow.
Fly the colors, guys. Fly the colors.
Do we call them TYT shirts or TYT t-shirts? We should call them TYT shirts. It's great.
See, all right. We can start that trend now. ShopTYT.com. Mandy Blizzardborn, which is an awesome Game of Thronesy name.
Except for the Mandy part.
Yeah, Mandy's not very.
Not a Game of Thrones.
There's probably a Lannister that's Mandy. Uncle Kevin and Mandy Lannister.
You know Uncle Kevin's wife, Mandy?
Anyway, she writes, we have many great secretaries. This man spends his life dick measuring, I swear. Mandy, that's really funny. Okay, Mandy, you get a free t-shirt, okay? Shop TYT.
Free TYT shirt.
TYT shirt, that's right. Aldo, one chingon writes in, the Dems nominated Hillary Clinton. They're not all that fucking bright either. I Am Sock says, the only time a Happy Gilmore quote is politically expedient. The price is wrong, bitch. And you know what? You get a t-shirt too, because I meant to make that joke and I forgot. But you did it, so nice job. You get one too. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. North Dakota has accepted a $15 million donation from the same corporation behind the DAPL pipeline. Now, this is Trans-Pacific Partners, and they have donated this money in order to essentially help with the costs that came about as a result of the protests of DAPL. The money will go to the North Dakota Department of Energy Services, DES, to help deal with debt brought on as a result of the Dakota Access Pipeline protests. A bill passed by the state legislature in 2017 included language saying that the governor and DES could accept reimbursement in the form of land, cash, or other assets from non-state sources for state costs incurred relating to unlawful activity associated with the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The state did take out a pretty gigantic loan to help pay for some of the costs that came about as a result of those protests, $40 million to be specific. And so as a result, it makes sense for them to look for ways to pay that money back. But it's a little concerning because this is a form of bribery. This is essentially telling state lawmakers, yeah, you see those shady protesters? We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you $15 million as long as you take care of us.
What's the name of the tribe?
Standing Rock?
Standing Rock, yeah. Well, so, you say it's a bribe. If the Standing Rock give $15 million to the state, too, to help defray the cost, then everything would be even.
Oh, yeah. And it's Sioux Nation overall.
Right.
Yeah. So,
they probably have $15 million.
Yeah. So, look, guys, this is a terrible idea, and I'm going to prove it to you even if you're a huge right-winger. This is, yes, it's a form of bribery. Later, I'll give you money, and you have the cops work for me. It turns the cops into the Pinkertons. In fact, what it basically does is it privatizes the police department, which is a terrible idea. So how am I going to prove it even to the right-wingers? Like Young Turks did business. What if the Young Turks said to the cops, hey, don't worry, we'll give you money to rough up some of the right-wingers. I mean, not rough them up, but when they have a protest, it's interfering with my business, if you know what I mean. And later, I'm going to give you a donation.
Yeah.
Okay? And then they come and kick your ass, and you go, what the hell? I'm part of the community. I'm doing First Amendment rights. I'm doing a Tea Party protest here, or an alt-right protest or something. Mm-hmm. And I go, isn't that a shame? I just gave a donation to the cops. What's the big deal? And you guys are costing this city so much money with your damn right-wing protests. And I was just trying to have the cops recoup that cost. The community should be proud of what I'm doing. Otherwise, we'd all have to pay. That's why I gave the cops money.
But, let's put it in a context that I think conservatives would understand. Imagine if we were going to go to a college campus to give a speech, okay? Conservative protesters show up, and the cops rough up those protesters with water cannons, because that's what happened to DAPL, right? And then we turn around and say, oh, you know what? We are going to give the administration a $15 million donation to deal with that. to deal with
the costs of those right wingers.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't have that kind of money, but like to drive them nuts, Soros does have that kind of money. If Soros said, "I'll cover the cost of any way that you deal with the protests on college campuses," this is a terrible idea. Don't privatize the police.
Why don't you ask him in the meeting?
Yeah, next time I get him on the phone.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Also, I mean, these guys have $15 million to just give to the state of North Dakota. I mean, it's the money that exists in corporate America, and I got corporate America employs people. They have so much money. They have so much money. They were like, here's $15 million, just because we're good guys. But we know this will help us later.
But the problem is our taxes are so high that they just can't succeed.
That's right. They got $15 million to just give to North Dakota. They don't need to give it to North Dakota, right?
But also, one last thing about this. Remember,
because they say they're giving it just out of the goodness of their heart, right?
Oh, sure. Of course they are. But remember this, guys. If they had to hire private security at the level that the cops were present to protect their private interests, right? Dakota Access Pipeline would have had to spend more money. Instead, they say, okay, we're going to use your public cops to work for us, and later we'll give you a fraction of that money, and we both bribed you and privatized the police and haven't really paid the full cost of it.
Right.
So it's a win-win for them and a lose-lose for us, because then it's not our government anymore, it's their government.
They did also receive a $10 million grant from the Department of Justice to help recoup the costs of, the protests. And then North Dakota did. So the state government managed to get $10 million from the Department of Justice. And also, Elizabeth Warren released a statement about this that I wanted to share with you guys. Let's go to graphic 27. She says, "This is nothing more than a dangerous public relations stunt by Energy Transfer Partners. They should play by the rules, fully consider the environmental and human impact of this pipeline, and respect the concerns of tribal leaders." I wanted to read that statement because she at least made a statement about it, and I think it's important. But they don't care about the environmental concerns. They know about the environmental concerns. They're not concerned about it.
So it already worked. I mean, the governor, the statement that he issued, "We are grateful for Dakota Access Pipeline's recognition of the significant impacts this project has had on our state." So, I mean, they're already you think you're going to have a fair and impartial government as this pipeline goes further, and as the Dakota Access's Energy Partners wants to go further and do more? No, they've got it. They won. Yeah, we knew they'd win, but they won.
When you have what the right wing would call big government officials saying we are grateful to our private benefactors, whether it's George Soros or the Koch brothers, or in this case Dakota Access Pipeline, it is a terrible idea for our democracy.
Yeah.
And good for Elizabeth Warren.
All right, we got to take one more break. Let's do that, and when we come back, the arms deals that Trump is planning on making or allowing corporations to make.
They are beautiful, and they are big.
They're definitely
some of the best arms.
Okay, yeah, but it's a disaster story.
Our secretaries have the best arms.
And legs. All right, we'll be right back. I have decided that I'm going to get ripped. Okay?
What?
Okay?
Like, physically?
Yeah. Okay. What, you don't believe me?
I 100% don't believe you.
I will get so ripped, here's my prediction, that someone at TYT will say, "Cenk, you've got to stop working out."
We're tired of you winning.
So you don't believe me?
Cenk, you don't have time to, do your daily duties for the main show.
You don't have time for your daily duties. Because what you guys don't know is how great my muscles already are.
It's absolutely possible. But you can't have Leah run to the food truck to get you, 2 different types of grilled cheeses with, tater tots for lunch. You can't have that anymore.
Let's see what happens.
You also have to go to the gym regularly.
Let's see what happens. All I'm saying is, let's see what happens. Have I ever been wrong about a prediction? Almost that.
and Francis here. This is where everybody has to listen. Welcome to TYT Sports, everybody. I am your host, Francis Maxwell. Jason here. Welcome to TYT Sports. Search the jersey. TYT Sports. Steph Curry signed with Under Armour.
Tom Brady's mad, by the way.
Do you hear me? Buy on TYT Sports. Actually, we will look at the description box below instead of lying about the description box below. And it's throw another picture of the UK bacon. And another. And in fact, throw in another one. Can you see your belly?
If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee you. You said I had small hands? They're not small, huh? I never heard that one before.
Directors Cenk, Ben, and Anna with you guys. Dances with writes in on hashtag TYT Live. That's what you use if you want to reach us on Twitter. They don't need to give it to them, but got to keep them greased for the next land grab. So don't forget about that. Remember that a lot of that land is on disputed territory. It was and Sioux Nation never gave up the rights to that land, and actually the federal government knows that and has tried to pay them in the past for taking the land in violation of a treaty. So that's a good point. I mean, they're wrong in a thousand different ways, but they have 15 million and Sioux Nation doesn't. Dr. Chaos MD writes in, now North Dakota law enforcement are officially a private military for hire. Cashing that check from DAPL is proof. And then this is actually from yesterday on YouTube Super Chat. But I want to give a shout out to a panel I was not on. They said, no, me, JR, and Anna. This isn't a power panel. It's a super panel.
Oh.
Okay, all right. God bless.
It's a big, beautiful panel.
It's a big, beautiful panel. Anyway, and member shout outs are Sheila Schneider and Mark Carlin. You guys are awesome. You guys make the show possible. TYTnetwork.com/join, you know it, to become a member, support the show, and get the whole show anytime you want, ad free. Okay, for your convenience, and all the network shows as well. Ben, while I was away, somebody said to say hi to you because they love What the Flick and didn't care much about me. All right. That goes to Matt Atchity out there, too. Okay, all right. What's next, Anna?
All right. UN sanctions in response to North Korea's testing of missiles has led to China finally ordering the shutdown of North Korean companies that operate in its own country. Now, North Korean companies in China, including those that have joint ventures with Chinese firms, must shut down within less than 4 months. According to reports, China's Ministry of Commerce and the State Administration for Industry and Commerce said in an online statement that as part of implementing UN sanctions, North Korean entities and individuals that have set up businesses in China must shut down within 120 days of the latest United Nations Security Council sanctions, which were passed on September 11th. So this is great news because, look, it's a double-edged sword, because on one hand it's great because you want to cut off resources to Kim Jong-un's regime, but at the same time, the people that are going to suffer most are the North Korean people. It's a complicated situation, but obviously China's finally taking some action, so that's good news.
Yeah, and it is a little unprecedented here because China doesn't often crack down on North Korean business interests, and the reason for that is they're worried about creating instability in North Korea. Because if there's instability, everybody's going to rush across the border into China and cause a giant problem. So they're trying to keep things as stable as possible. And they, at most, tweak North Korea, but don't hit them too hard. But now, I think that they've done their 5th nuclear test earlier in this month. China's thinking maybe it's going to create more instability if we don't actually take action against them. So now this doesn't cover all the business between North Korea and China. A lot of that is off the books and etc. But it is real, and so to have this go into effect in about like Anna said, in 120 days could make a difference. This one's going to hurt them, dog. And but we don't know what North Korea's reaction will be to that.
Right. Yeah. So that reaction is definitely something to be concerned about. But another thing to keep in mind, and you briefly mentioned it, was that a lot of North Korean businesses that operate in China are done in like a super tricky, shady way. So there'll be like some sort of middleman involved, and kind of like
underhanded.
It's very underhanded
and a little undercover.
Yeah.
That was good.
I was just waiting.
I know, I saw you. You were just the entire time.
Like somebody say something. I can say something.
Oh God, you are unbelievable.
Okay, so by the way, to that point, the rules don't apply to nonprofits or non-commercial infrastructure projects. So there are some businesses that would be exempt. Also, businesses can apply to regulators for exemptions on an individual basis. So they're leaving like an avenue open in which some of these businesses can get an exemption from this new policy.
And they'll say, look, we're not really affiliated with those guys. We're unaffiliated.
Okay, I would have gone with individual basis, just for the record. Yeah.
All right, guys. Look, it's a serious story. Let's hope to God it works so that North Korea doesn't start a war.
Yeah.
Or Trump. Okay, what's next?
All right. Speaking of wars, the Trump administration is planning on loosening restrictions when it comes to the global sale of weapons. Now, in 2015, President Obama had actually passed a few restrictions when it came to our weapons manufacturers and the type of, sales that they can do with foreign countries. But Trump doesn't like that, and neither do the weapons manufacturers. So he does plan on undoing some of those restrictions and even going further to make it easier for these weapons manufacturers to sell to foreign countries. Now, the changes, which could include enlisting the State Department and Pentagon to more actively advocate on behalf of American arms manufacturers, as if they don't already, are set to be included in an executive order or presidential memorandum that Trump will issue this fall.
But pause there for a second, because, look, I know that unfortunately a lot of our foreign policy is centered around corporate America, and it's not really corporate America. They're multinational corporations that just happen to be powerful in America, partly because of the donations that they give. But this is really going a little further than that. Why is our military helping to sell weapons to people who might use it against them, just so that defense contractors can make a buck. That's nuts. But the only thing crazier than that is to have the State Department, which again is right. They've unofficially done that for a long time. By the way, it's turned out disastrous when our government has destabilized democracies, overthrown democratically elected leaders so that American companies can make more money, and it has blown back on us almost every time and caused the actual American people a lot of damage. But now to actively and out in the open say, yeah, the State Department, instead of doing diplomacy and creating peace around the world, is going to do the opposite. They're going to help sell record-breaking number of arms all throughout the world, and you use them anywhere you like.
If we're the world's cops, right? The cops want less guns. I mean, why? I don't know everything that the United Nations does, but shouldn't there be like constant global conferences where the leaders and the leaders of the free world get together and work out ways to massively restrict the flow of weapons around the world? I mean, wouldn't that be better? And except for one significant group, the people who make those weapons,
right?
Who are enormously powerful companies here in the United States. Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, just a slightly relevant touch on Puerto Rico, but he tweeted today, "It's worth asking why we spend $600 billion a year on the military." That doesn't include independent private sales of weapons, but it's worth asking why we spend $600 billion a year on the military if we can't get more than 5,000 troops and 50 helicopters to Puerto Rico. So the State Department will advocate for this, do this, freeing the sale of weapons around the world, make it easier, but yet somehow we can't step to it and help a U.S. territory that's just off our shore.
Hey, I'm going to add one quick thing to that. Just Democrats actually just started a petition to say we should not do any other business in Congress, including tax cuts for the rich and selling weapons all across the world so that defense contractors can get rich, until we aid the people of Puerto Rico. Okay, it's justdemocrats.com/Puerto Rico. We'll put a link down below. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is one of the Just Democrats running for office in New York, and you should check out her page, justdemocrats.com/Ocasio. We'll put that link below too. She's the one that's leading this process and saying, are you kidding me? We're not doing anything for these people, and they're Americans, and they need our help right now. So I know you're prioritizing your tax cuts and your weapons sales, but can we do this first, get them help first? I think that makes sense. Look, they've got their lobbyists. We have you guys. So go out there, and these petitions do make a difference. They made a giant difference in the Medicare for All debate. So justdemocrats.com/Puerto Rico.
Okay, so I got to give you guys more of the specific details about what this administration is doing when it comes to these arms sales, because it is terrible. So the new arms transfer initiative being run out of the White House National Security Council aims to make U.S. companies more competitive when allies are shopping for fighter jets, ground vehicles, warships, missile defense, and also other military gear in an intensely competitive market.
But can I just say, this is total nonsense.
No, I know, because we are leading when it comes to arms sales. 50% of weapon sales, arms sales, come from the United States. International arms sales. So the competition isn't even freaking close.
So we literally lap the field. We're more than half. So not only are we number one in this category, selling arms to oftentimes dictators like Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, where in Saudi Arabia used it against civilians, to Nigeria, to all these different places. And since we sell more than half the arms, and some very defense point, it's not just selling guns to people, and cops would be concerned if you had it in a domestic. It's like selling armor-piercing bullets to people. And so we're selling really high-tech weapons sometimes. And by the way, again, sometimes letting technology that's really important to our national security slip out from underneath us so they can make a buck. And to say that, it's a really competitive market, when we sell more arms than the rest of the world combined, is totally not true.
Right.
It's just an excuse to make more money.
And it's not like we're going to track these weapons, right? And making the argument that, we're doing these arms sales to our allies. that's worked out for us in the past, right? Where we arm our so-called allies, and then later on, when we engage in war with them, we unfortunately armed our enemies. So, to give you, go ahead.
Yeah, just super quick. Not even later on, we armed those countries in the Gulf, like Saudi Arabia. They were the number one provider of arms to rebel forces we were fighting inside Iraq, the insurgents in Iraq. That got our troops killed, literally. Okay,
Yeah,
but some defense contractor made some money.
Yeah, I know, but let's not get offended by that. Let's get offended because someone decided to kneel during the national anthem during an NFL game. Now, what Trump is doing also greenlights sales of precision-guided munitions to Saudi Arabia that the Obama administration held up over concerns that they have been used to kill civilians in the offensive against rebels in Yemen.
Precision-guided munitions for missiles.
Yeah.
Those are bombs. Not what are they called, bombs.
Yeah, and they also sold very high-tech drones. And there's a reason why they put those regulations in place. It's not because they're no good liberals. They just like to make sure you don't make money. No, if you sell the high-tech drones to others, then they have the technology. They could just reverse engineer it, and it goes all across the world, and it could be used against our troops. There was a reason for that regulation, otherwise known as a law. And when you take that away because, those are donors, Republican donors, we got to make them more money. Look, sneaker companies want to make more money, have at it, Hoss. And we want to, if they're theoretically American, whatever that means, and we want to support them and have our diplomats selling Nikes. It's a weird thing, but it's not nearly as destructive as having our diplomats going around selling arms to people who might then use it against us.
Right.
I'm not so sure that some of the, I don't know enough about it, but some of the stuff could be kind of socialized. Like you don't get to make anything. Like the idea that we could massively restrict the people, or at least associated with the United States of America, and then get together with our allies, that we restrict the amount of precision-guided missiles made. Like that's okay. That strikes. I don't want the free market to dictate that in any way.
Yeah, what if the free market says, ISIS has a lot of money, which they do because they got a lot of the oil from Iraq and Syria. They say, okay, I'm just buying it on the free market. Give me a nuke. Do you want the free market then?
Right.
Of course, there's got to be restrictions.
So because we are unable to, because our isolation and our wonderfully fortuitous geographic isolation that we have here, which has protected us for so many hundreds of years. Well, just two. We know that. Since sometime in the mid-18th century. The nukes make no difference there, right? We can't. That doesn't help us, right?
Yeah, the big waters is
big water doesn't help us as much with nukes. So we work our ass off, or at least the smart ones do, to restrict those nukes, right? But we don't. So the concept that there are weapons out there that the world would get together to try to restrict, but we won't restrict the weapons that have killed far, far, far more people than nukes and have wreaked havoc on the world and destabilized the world and made us more in danger than ever before. We won't come together in the world and as a civilized nations and try to restrict that. But again, because it's a different way of thinking, right? And we don't think that way. The companies, the weapons manufacturers are given free reign, and when their reign is restricted a little bit, as they were in the Obama administration, we get a guy like Trump in there and he unrestricted.
Yeah, so we weren't allowed to, there were at least restrictions when it came to selling arms to Bahrain and also to Nigeria. Those restrictions have now been lifted. And just to give you a sense of how much this type of dealing has increased under the Trump administration, Graphic 16, in the first 8 months of 2017, the total value of U.S. arms transfer notifications has nearly doubled to $48 billion compared to the same period in 2016. And so this has already begun, and it is definitely going to come back to haunt us in the future.
Okay, the last thing, they're revamping the conventional arms transfer policy so that we can sell more military-grade weapons to foreign nations. They're also, this is my favorite quote, they're making the international traffic in arms regulations, quote, more user-friendly. Oh, great. Okay, then it'll be user-friendly for the dictators buying our weapons, and that'll just be fantastic for world peace. Finally, guys, think about it this way. And as I gave the Nike analogy in sneakers, it dawned on me that if we had in these orders, they're literally saying the people working out of our embassies, not just the military, which in essence we're now privatizing, to work as salespeople for defense contractors, but also our diplomats. If those diplomats put on like Nike tracksuits and went and said, "Hey, you guys got to buy Nike in Cambodia or whatever," we'd say, "Oh, that's so unseemly and ridiculous." But this is way worse. They're telling them part of your job is go sell them weapons to kill each other with.
Yeah.
And the American taxpayer doesn't make $1 off that. It is just for private gain. That's insanity, man.
Are we done for the hour?
No, we got to do one more.
We gotta do one fun story.
Okay.
Have some fun? Okay.
Go.
All right. Megyn Kelly is not doing well. Now, health-wise, she's fine, so don't worry. But she's not doing well when it comes to daytime television. I'll give you an example. So, Megyn Kelly is now hosting Megyn Kelly Today. Not the Today Show, but it is very confusing for people like Deborah Messing, who had no idea that she was going on the Megyn Kelly version of Today. And so, guests are not happy about appearing on her show. Her ratings aren't doing so well. And this comes after another failed show that she did after Fox News. So poor ratings and even worse publicity for Sunday Night with Megyn Kelly. The limited series was scrapped 2 episodes before it was supposed to end, thanks in part to widespread criticism of Kelly's softball interviews of Putin and Alex Jones.
By the way, maybe it was initially going to be softball in the promo that they did with Alex Jones. I mean, who let that happen? It's beyond me, if them in the car goofing around. But I was not on the show for any of these times, but the re-edited interview, they clearly went in and redid it. And what came out of it was, I thought, fairly reasonably tough.
Yeah,
when all was said and done.
I'm going to defend Megyn Kelly in a second, so keep going.
Oh, okay. So let's get to the Deborah Messing thing. So the cast of why am I blanking on this?
Will and Grace.
Will and Grace. Sorry about that. So the cast of Will and Grace went on Megyn Kelly's show, and Deborah Messing, who is one of the stars of that show, didn't expect Megyn Kelly to be the host. She didn't realize what was going on, and then she regretted it and talked about how much she regretted it on social media because Megyn Kelly had said something pretty insensitive about the gay community on this very show. Kelly managed to make things weird when she flippantly referred to homosexuality as, quote, the gay thing, while sharing a stage with a group of queer people and their allies. So the strange gay thing interaction led to Deborah Messing saying in a comment on one of her Instagram posts that she didn't even know that Megyn Kelly was the host until she arrived, and that she regretted appearing on the show, and that she was dismayed by Kelly's comments. Okay.
It was a peculiar interview. I mean, her gay line was weird, but I don't think it. I think she was. I think it was an attempt at a inclusive joke.
So look, I think if you just look at that as an isolated case, I hear you. Like, it would not raise a red flag at all for me. Okay, she said the gay thing. You know, you're speaking off the cuff. Maybe something comes out and it doesn't sound right. But then you have to take that in the context of Megyn Kelly and all the horrendous things she said about gay people on Fox News. You know who she is. Like, just because she's on, daytime television now, and it's an NBC show, doesn't mean that you erase.
Did she say terrible things about gay people?
She did. John Oliver actually had like a really funny mashup of all the terrible things she said when she was on Fox News in his last episode. You should
But about gay people, really? It was included in there?
I don't remember specifically that montage, including her comments about the gay community, but she has, she's defended the businesses that want to discriminate against gay people and not, bake them wedding cakes and all that stuff. She's been very conservative on that issue.
Sure. So look, I don't agree with Megyn Kelly's politics, but I think that and Anna makes a great point about, well, context does matter, but they are really looking to nitpick everything she's doing. So, look, here on this particular issue, I'm a little biased because I've said something equally awkward to Kevin Spacey. If you remember when we worked down in Miami, Ben.
I know, but you were this like inexperienced, like red carpet reporter. It was like the beginning of your career. You had no idea what you were doing. You didn't have like this, gigantic portfolio of shitty comments.
All right, I hear you, and I had no hostility towards the gay thing. Okay, nor did I believe that Santa must be white. Okay, all right, but Deborah Messing it's also a little on you to know the show that you're going on. So this excuse of like, I didn't know Megyn Kelly Today was hosted by Megyn Kelly.
Yeah, but I think first of all, we have no idea that Deborah Messing is busy and a big star. And
the name of the show
is still Today. This you're going on the Today Show. You know,
whatever. So like, I mean, it seems like a weak sauce excuse afterwards.
I think that what she said is likely true, that she didn't know, and I think it's also weak sauce. Like, so what? So what? Like, it's not. It wasn't the worst thing in the world to go.
No. I'm totally going in the opposite direction from you guys. Okay, like I get it. Again, let me reiterate: if this was just isolated, she hadn't been doing Fox News Channel, I hear you, and I would defend her. However, like, isn't it frustrating that she said all the things that she said on Fox News for years and years, and then, oh, who cares? All of that's just going to be erased, and, miraculously now you get to host a daytime television show on NBC as if you're not, like, the hateful person that you are.
But, okay, that gets to the heart of this thing, and we'll get to more of her so-called screw-ups in a second, but I'm not saying that nobody's at fault here. TV is at fault. Not just NBC, but TV, because it's so damn fake. Okay, we knew Megyn Kelly's conservative, we know it, but now we're going to put her in a new show on a new network, and now she's not conservative anymore, she's milquetoast, she's in the middle, and she's just going to play it, without any politics. No, if you're going to hire Megyn Kelly, let her be conservative, and let her do whatever show she wants, okay? Because, by the way, you'll get more of an audience that way. Instead, you're making her do something that's totally fake. That's why, if at all, the ratings are down. So
I don't even know if that would increase her ratings. I think
it's not the right channel for it. That's why when she left Fox News, I predicted, once again accurately, sorry, but it's true, that of course it wouldn't be successful on NBC. You have to match the right person for the right channel.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like, oh, she did okay in that context, and she'll be a great Today Show host. Yeah, I mean, so stupid and old.
We're taking a Fox talent who was, by the time she left Fox, arguably unpopular at Fox.
Oh,
right?
really?
Sure,
yeah,
because,
you're right.
As always, and that gets to and then asking those Fox viewers to come over to NBC, who they consider to be part of the giant left-wing media. So I think she had to find a totally new audience, an audience that would already be watching, some of whom, if they weren't watching Fox, probably don't agree with her. Then, to Cenk's point, which is true, is that she's like saying, "Oh, I'll do anything. I don't want to talk about politics. There should be a respite from politics." And many journalists are Trump obsessed. She said, which again, if you're about to be a journalist, probably not what you should be saying about other journalists covering arguably the most corrupt and most dangerous president we've had.
Or just covering a president.
Just covering a president, right? A president who doesn't want to be covered and makes covering him hard. That is not what a journalist does. So I think she made a mistake there. The other thing that
none of this is journalism,
right? Now, the other thing that we do as a people in general, is that as soon as I have a neighbor who is very conservative, believes, as I told Cenk on Sunday, believes that the former president of the United States is gay, killed his lover, and is married to a man. So, and she doesn't say it with a wink. She believes it. Obama was gay, killed his lover, and Michelle is a man, right? And that was a story that went around in the far reaches of right-wing lunacy. And she's a ham owner, as we would say back in Baltimore. And she's said a number of other things that would indicate that she is she's potentially dangerous, and you don't want to get into a long conversation with her. But she's been very nice lately, and
that's good.
No, and she accused us, my wife and I. She had some leakage under her house, and she accused us of causing it because when we moved in, we had a handyman, and he did some hammering in our garage. So he suggested that the hammering in our garage caused pipes to break under her home. He just had a hammer and a hand. He would hit a hammer like this. Mm-hmm. And so I said, hey, I don't know a lot about this, but that's not a thing that happens, right? And she said, well, when the city jackhammered, it caused some leakage in my house. I was like, well, that's a jackhammer on the street. This is a guy in our garage. I'm pretty sure it didn't cause your house. But I go, you know what? Let's wait till you get it looked at. We'll speak. Then she comes to me a few days later. She goes, oh, my guys came out, and I had a lot of problems. It was pretty significant. It was obviously not caused by the hammer.
Oh,
right. Oh. And so I called my wife. I go, hey, I just talked to the neighbor, and she said, and we were all like, hey, look at that, fantastic. God bless her. We should, let's have her over for coffee. We
No, don't do
live
that.
next to her, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, we're doing it. Like, you get a conservative to have a moment where they're not a lunatic, and we're like, hey, what bravery! Amazing, right? And to some extent, that's what happened with Megyn Kelly. I don't know her politics, and the fact is she took on Trump in the debate, and she didn't flinch, and she rose far above the Fox bar. And I think she's an excellent broadcaster. She was good at broadcasting at that show. But we elevated her because she was one of the people on Fox who didn't rant and rave like a lunatic, even though, as you'll point out, there were many instances where she said things that would make your jaw drop. But she wasn't Sean Hannity, and she wasn't Bill O'Reilly, and she wasn't Lou Dobbs.
It's a low bar.
Right, it's a low bar, but she cleared it so easily. So
All right.
I think those are all the mistakes that we make with this.
So one of the other issues was when Jane Fonda was on to promote a new movie that she's in, and I guess Ann Coulter, Megyn Kelly, asked her about her plastic surgery. Jane Fonda didn't like that. I don't really care about that.
She gave the side eye to her, and everybody's like, "Got her."
Yeah.
But look, it's arguably a tough question, and yeah, it's a little awkward. And she gave her that stare at. Yeah, but. Hey, that's...
She seems happy. It's just fun.
No, and of course, Fonda later said it was an inappropriate question in that context. She said, look, I've done plastic surgery, and I acknowledge it. It's not something that I hide at all. It's just, Robert Redford's sitting next to me. We're talking about the movie. It's not an appropriate time. I don't agree with Jane Fonda. I like her politics. I don't like Megyn Kelly's politics. But I think that... when is an appropriate time?
Yeah, by the way, it's daytime television. If ever there was a time to talk about plastic surgery, it's daytime television.
Here, I'll be the first. I disagree with both of you. No, you want to bring her on, talk about plastic surgery, you have a long-form interview about her life, they bring on... And by the way, Jane Fonda's 80. She looks like that. Yeah, she's had... This just in. She's had plastic surgery. And great plastic surgery.
Yeah, she has. I want to know who she was.
But they wouldn't ask a guy.
No, they might ask a guy. Why not? I'd ask Vladimir Putin. She should have asked Putin. She had Putin on, too. Then it would have been fair. That dude's had surgery.
By the way, she's 79. So, again, I interview celebrities like this, and that's not... If you had 2 hours, then maybe you'd get to it, But you don't get to it necessarily.
I just hate getting into the business of what someone should ask and what they shouldn't ask, right? Like, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
Of course, she gets to ask it, but guess what? Yeah. You're going to get snapped at, and it's going to create an awkward moment. That is not good TV.
Yeah.
It's actually awkward TV. It depends. Some of those are good moments.
Yeah.
I would say probably not.
All right. Now, final thing, and I think this actually added to the quality of the show. There was a mishap with one of the cameramen during one of the episodes. We have a video of it. Let's take a look.
A whirlwind, but I think what's been most fascinating is that a whirlwind, but I think what's been most fascinating is that
Who said
cameraman, because he realized he was in the shot. Okay, see, this is what I'm talking about. It's fun, but come on, that's not on Megyn Kelly. She didn't make the cameraman
do
that.
First week of blocking a show.
Yeah,
it's no problem.
No, but here is what I do think is on Megyn Kelly. So she also addressed her ratings or addressed the criticism, and this is what she said. I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for watching this week. It's been educational. I've just been so delighted that the media response, which has really been no, the viewer response has been awesome, and I'm so grateful to have all of you giving us a chance. Like, I'm kind of tired of everyone who gets any type of criticism bitching and whining and crying about the media. Everything's the media's fault, right? Like the fire chief who decided to use the N-word on Facebook to refer to, NFL players who refused to stand during the national anthem. It's not his fault that he used the N-word and then was forced to resign. It's the media's fault. No, it's not the media's fault. Take some freaking responsibility for your actions. Same with Megyn Kelly. And by the way, it's not as serious with Megyn Kelly, but your ratings suck. They're not good.
Well, first of all, I saw that actual clip, and she was cute, I thought. She was like, because she was like a joke. She was saying, I'm so delighted, and the media, no, and the audience laughed. She was like saying, yeah, I know the media gave me a hard time, and then she was like, I'm just grateful for all of you, thank you. And her ratings are very comparable. They're down 4% in the audience, down 11% in the news demo from the same time last year, the exact same day last year. But that was the day of the Trump-Clinton debate, and everything in news was massively, massively spiked. So her numbers are are very consistent. And we don't know. We'll find out in months whether people are interested in going to NBC and watching Megyn Kelly. I think Cenk.
Yeah, to be fair, I really think the media is nitpicking. So she did a softball interview with Lyle Menendez too. That's the charge. And she asked, like, was there joy in your life? Whatever. I don't know, man. If the guy's in prison, that's not that crazy a question. So, and by the way, I got news for you. The rest of the media, this giant softball interview after softball interview. So, like, now you realize there's softball interviews on NBC. So, cry me a river on that.
I'm with you. And the difference with Alex Jones, because that was a news magazine show, right? And that's why the world came down on her. Because Alex Jones was the ear of the president. But Lyle Menendez, hey man, he locked up. We know he did it. That case is settled. There's no really tough question to ask Lyle Menendez.
Yeah,
right?
like, did you do it?
Well, yeah. The more interesting thing is
in prison for the rest of
the how's your life in prison? Like that, if you want to interview him, that's what the interesting thing is. So,
yeah.
And I think she's an excellent broadcaster. I do. So
wow, it's like love fest happening.
No. I just think tactically she's good at being a broadcaster. Like literally, it's a hard job. Not everybody can do it, and she has a deafness to her.
I just think all these TV guys are so useless. They're reading from their prompters and stuff. I just look.
Don't knock that.
I hear you, brother. Okay, but. Like these, like general, like, oh, we hired her because she has a great smile. Oh yeah. Okay, so
I'll give her that. She does have a great smile.
Yeah. Look at that.
Okay, so look, and her saying your audience, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. Her saying that the audience response has been terrific is just that's not really true because the ratings are down. Again, good context as to why the ratings might be down, but you can't say, no, the audience has been great to me.
We have no sample size. We'll find out in months whether they're successful. And what counts as successful now in the world of TV is you need a much smaller number to be successful.
Yeah. So, yeah. She's conservative, and that's, you make of that whatever you like, and I don't like, okay? But, and I think that people are nitpicking her a little bit. I think what they accuse of her of the mainstream media does all the time in other contexts as well. So if I was NBC, I'd just let her be whoever she is, and that might turn out to be a more loathsome show, but probably better rated. It's just because it'll be more genuine. So
as always, the only way a broadcaster ever works is if they're genuine, or at least can fake being genuine, right? Fake authenticity, yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys. Got another kind of hour coming up, and important topics for you there as well, including a very controversial story on whether you're allowed to fire gay people now because of a ruling change in the Trump administration just for being gay. So that's massive. We'll talk about that when we come.
Alright, we got a graphic incoming. Putting up 3, 2, 1. Alright. Video next. And next video. And power panel. And dropping it.
You trust the establishment media.
The United States economy has never been better. Monetary policy is spectacular. Everybody thought Jamie Dimon was the king of Wall Street last week. Well, it might be getting loose now. He takes the crown. The best sales force out there is Merrill Lynch, and now it goes to BNA. It's pretty amazing.
Buying opportunity. I do think this is a buying opportunity. We're going to see a stabilization and just a snapback. The rally will be jaw-dropping.
The Occupy Wall Street movement is not a spontaneous protest against economic inequality.
This is what we mean by the establishment press.
It is a well thought out campaign to bring down the infrastructure of this country. The embarrassment is that I'm given credibility in this world because of the disappointment that the public has in what the news media does. I'm the former chairman of the Veterans Committee, and I learned a little bit about the cost of war. What the president is trying to do, and I agree with him, is to do everything that we can without going to war. So what you say to your critics, I'm talking about Democratic critics, who say, you know what, he's really just a socialist pacifist.
I very rarely read in any coverage of Bernie that he's a socialist.
Bernie Sanders is a socialist, for God's sake.
Most analysts are saying that Hillary Clinton's going to win in a landslide.
I continue to believe Mr. Trump will not be president. We got Trump at 279, 259.
I know you don't believe that.
We're not going to be polite anymore. You know what we're going to do? We're going to fight back. Fight for a free and independent media. We're done with politeness. We fight back. We are going to put together the best investigative reporting team in the country. You like George Chapman in the field, challenging Democrats? He's the one that took down Donald Brazil. Thank God for that. I'll give me 10 George Chapmans. Look at the damage I can do. TYT will give you the 4 horse, and we will let them gallop. Help unleash real journalism in the country. We don't need anybody else anymore but you guys. TYTnetwork.com/go. This is going to be amazing.
Complex subject. Nobody knew that healthcare could be so complicated.
You said I had small hands. They're not smaller. I never heard that one before.
Drop. Okay, same power panel, but with Ambry Allen joining us now. And so, Ambry, great to have you. Now people get offended if I don't go nuts before a power panel.
Surprising.
Yeah.
Surprising.
No, I have different ways of coming in. All right. So I'm going to read a couple of tweets, and then we're going to do some of these amazing stories we have for you here. So Digital Shard writes in about the North Korea story we're covering. One more time, and I'm unsubscribing. And then he says, JK. For you kids at home, that means just kidding. Okay. Dylan Lochner writes in, God, these jokes are unbearable. Okay. Now we go to the Pentagon story. Celeste Holmes says, thanks to money in politics, the U.S. government has been turned into a business venture that uses government departments as sales arms for corporate America and their global interests.
Well, she got 280 characters. That was long.
That was pretty long, yeah. But she's absolutely right. And finally, on the Megyn Kelly story, Rafer Madness says, a room with Megyn Kelly and Deborah Messing in it. On political views alone, I'd pay to be in that room. Which, by the way, is exactly my point. Let her be conservative. Put Deborah Messing in there. Let her know who the host is. Okay? And then let's have some fun. That's good TV. Have a real conversation where they disagree. Okay. Anyways. All right. We got plenty of stuff to agree and disagree on now.
Yes. All right. During this past election, Donald Trump claimed that he would look out for the gay community. And so it's a little unsurprising, if you know his style, that he has kind of reneged on that issue. In fact, his administration is now saying that gay employees have no protection if their employers fire them simply for being gay. Case in point, a case involving a man by the name of Donald Zarda, who claims that he was fired from his employers simply for being gay. Now, a lawyer for Trump's Department of Justice argued that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 does not protect LGBTQ Americans from being fired because of their sexual orientation. And keep in mind, this is a complete reversal of the government's position on such matters under previous presidents. So here's another twist to the story that's pretty amazing. So while the Department of Justice is making this case, there's also the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is supporting Zarda in this case. They are arguing that Zarda does have civil rights and that his employers should not be allowed to fire him simply because of his sexual orientation. The Justice Department argument before the Second Circuit Court of Appeals came in the case of Donald Zarda, who claims that he was fired by his company Altitude Express for being gay. Now, employers under the Title VII or under Title VII are permitted to consider employees out of work sexual conduct. This is an argument by the Justice Department, by the way. There is a common sense, intuitive difference between sex and sexual orientation. That is the argument.
That's Trump's Justice Department
Yes,
in that case.
yes.
Yeah, the notion that a Trump Justice Department lawyer has come in and has correctly assessed that the last 53 years of interpretation of the Civil Rights Act is wrong is preposterous. Preposterous.
I hear you, but here's where I'm going to shock the world, and I'm more in the conservative position here. The 1964 Civil Rights Act is incredibly important. This landmark legislation. It mentions that you can't discriminate based on sex, but it does not say sexual orientation. So now I think it's unconscionable to fire someone for being gay.
What do you think they meant?
That's exactly my point. I don't think they meant sexual orientation. I think that if they wanted, they could put that in there. They meant you can't fire someone for being a woman, or theoretically for being a man. So now, look, there is a great counter argument. It's a very creative one, and one that has been accepted. So let me give you the full context. Greg Nevins from Lambda Legal makes the case. He's like, look, you can say that sex is the same as sexual orientation, because if you say a woman can have sex with a man and you can't fire her for that, you should also allow a man to have sex with a man and not fire her based on that, because that would be discriminating based on sex rather than sexual orientation.
Yeah, but
it's a creative legal argument, but they didn't say sexual orientation. I don't think they intended sexual orientation. But by the way, I'm in the minority on this issue, because since 2002, the courts have been ruling that you cannot be fired for being gay because of the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
I'm pretty certain they did not mean sexual orientation, because that's not something they talked about in 1964. But obviously the concept of it would apply to sexual orientation, and certainly the spirit of it. And correctly, Republican and Democratic administrations have assessed that we're not going to go ahead and discriminate against people because of sexual orientation, because it's obviously the right thing to do. So just because they didn't mean it, you come in and decide that you're going to change the intent of 53 years of interpretation of that law.
To be fair, it's not 53.
I got it, but a law 53 years old
since 2002, and some courts definitely disagree, but generally the courts.
But not the presidents, not the administrations. Even the Bush Department of Justice all ended up agreeing with it.
I honestly don't know enough about what the Bush Justice Department did, but
it says a complete reversal of government's position on matters under previous presidents. I don't think they just meant the one previous president.
I understand all that, and there's good arguments to be made, but I think they should pass a law saying you're not allowed to discriminate based on sexual orientation.
What do you do?
Or gender identity, right? To go ahead and expand the explicit protections, introduce a bill, although they've been introduced but unsuccessfully, right? So
don't lose track of who the bad guys are. And I know you're not, but but they're not going to pass this law under this Congress, probably, right? Or
put them, throw them out of office. Look, but I think
okay. So what do you do?
Consequences. So make the Republicans say, yes, we do not want to protect gay people. We don't. We vote no. Make them vote no. Introduce the legislation.
Agreed.
Okay, fine, but what do you do in the interim?
Well, in the interim, you got no, but there's not. Look, I believe that I am fairly conservative judicially, which is different than politically. And if they didn't say sexual orientation and they didn't mean sexual orientation, you've got to pass another law. As much as it's terrible.
Right, well, I mean, I don't have the full case history here, but there obviously, since many other laws have been passed that relate to sexual orientation, one could get the impression that the intent now is to include sex. I agree. We should pass a law. We should clear it up beyond any. But the notion that you're going to say, "Hey, Jim, it's not in there now, so you get to discriminate," that's a step backwards.
I mean, couldn't you also make the argument that the Supreme Court's ruling in regard to the Defense of Marriage Act is relevant to this case? Because, you know, the underlying issue with the Defense of Marriage Act ruling was, you know, the civil rights of the LGBT community. And so if you have the Supreme Court arguing in favor of the civil rights of the gay community, then isn't this a civil rights issue as well?
Yeah, and that's why I bring up the context and that it's perfectly acceptable to have this range of opinion that we have here legally. Of course, it's acceptable to have any opinion you like politically, but because you can make that case legally. But I think the other side would say, no, that applies to the government. The government cannot discriminate against gay Americans, whereas private citizens or private business in this case can discriminate legally because you never made it illegal to discriminate against gay people.
Right, but again, yes, you might be right on the law, but no one should be arguing for that. No right-thinking person should be making this argument, and all we should do is try and fix it. So whether if you were on the court, you might feel duty-bound to vote that way, you're not, right? So let's talk about it the right way, and let's fix it. On that, I agree. So go in, clear it up, fix it. But we may not, but getting that done, I suspect, would be difficult.
Yeah, look, if I was in charge of the government, would I go out of my way to make sure that gay people didn't have rights? Hell no. So I agree with you on that, Ben.
Yeah, and by the way, I just wanted to, again, quickly point out the fact that Trump lied, right? That he does not care about the gay community, doesn't care about their rights or protecting them. And so for certain gay individuals out there who like to run around calling Trump daddy, well, how do you like daddy now?
Yeah, because there's a choice here. You could believe that lawyer could come in and go, you know, doesn't apply to gay people, and use Cenk's logic, which might be right, and say that, and then you go, yeah, I don't care, right? Yeah, not prioritizing that. If you prioritize it, I'll fire you.
Yeah, and by the way, that is really fair. So if, let's say, I'm president, good luck, and somebody says, hey, should we use government resources to try to overturn the majority of the precedent since 2002 that gay people should not be discriminated upon by their private employers? Like, no,
of course not.
No, we're not going to spend government money doing that. Okay, and what I will spend government money on is trying to get a law that says, yes, you are not allowed to discriminate against gay people because I want every American to have the same exact rights as other Americans. And that is worthwhile, and that is something you fight for.
Yeah, this is also a government that's investigating affirmative action cases of reverse racism. So it doesn't surprise me, which is why we need to introduce legislation. So when a reckless administration is in place, they can't openly discriminate against folks. I think that's what we're trying to argue.
It's so weird because he's the least racist guy anybody knows.
All right, guys. We got to take one more break. Come right back.
The Gaslamp Killer, Peace to Absent presents 2016 shit. I like drums. I like big drums. Heavy, funky, deep drums. I'm not classically trained. I just started out as a record collector. I have synthesizers. I have all these modular synths and fun DJ tools that I use to make psychedelic sounds. It's not just the music. People want to leave their bodies in order to connect with the spirit world. And when you're making music, it's a similar kind of thing. You want to escape your day-to-day to leaving this shit behind and finding more of a deeper place to create from. That is the essence of Gas Lamp Killer music.
Hey, Al, I can't remember. Is there a specific blur we use for Miley Cyrus's butthole? Is it like a Gaussian or a mosaic or a compound?
Hey guys, welcome to TYT Sports. Ben Mankiewicz here, and we have a new guest to introduce. Delighted to do this. Francis Maxwell is our World Cup expert. We're going to start here with Group A, which is Brazil, Croatia, Mexico.
Brazil or Croatia are going to win this group. Unless weather hit Croatia, then maybe Cameroon. Mexico has no chance.
You know who has no chance? The U.S. Literally no chance.
Well, not sure if you're trying to piss me off or something, but not
What I told you about Mexico was a fact. What you were talking about U.S. was simply an opinion. USA has no chance. That's a fact.
Of course they don't. I might have been mistaken, because in football, there's always a chance, even when there's no chance.
Like I said, what you gave was an opinion. What I gave you was a fact.
Calm the assholeness down. Like I said, in football, there are no facts about results. No one counted on Real when they blasted Bayern 5-0. No one counted when Brazil lost to Mexico in the Olympics. I was trying to be polite, but unfortunately, your bitchness got the better.
Just like I said, the U.S. has no chance.
Personally, I'm rooting for Germany. I just think maybe Brazil and Spain.
Screw your BS. We all know it's Crimea for the win.
Bastard. Yeah, well, you can see it within the first 2 minutes. You're like, these guys are just, they're fast.
Absolutely, I agree. And they've always had that speed about them. It's always been about speed, but it's always...
Hey, Cenk, what's up?
And I'm reading some of the comments on a YouTube video I did. What the cuck? Go.
Night.
Let's find some contestants. Here's the puzzle. Wrist brace. There you go.
Back on the Young Turks, John writes in, everything Trump says or does is targeted to please the 38% which support him. That's true.
Oh, how's John doing?
Oh, we forgot John Idaho exists.
No, we didn't.
Somebody said a comment about John. Anyway, Jin Ho.
Okay, is he still like?
I think he still exists.
Okay.
Does anybody check in with him? Nobody, right? Of course not.
I think he came back. I think he's been back like a week.
Anyway, he's hammering in your garage. Jin Ho Choi writes in, if you want to protect rights of LGBTQIA people, pass laws explicitly prohibiting discrimination on the basis of sexuality, which is what we were saying. Okay. All right, guys. And we do a post game for you guys today. It's done by the crew on Fridays, and you guys will love it. They share more inappropriate stories than even we do. Become a member, support the show, get all the special content, including Aggressive Progressives. So that's tytnetwork.com/join. All right, what's next, Anna?
All right. Why aren't people getting married? Is marriage simply for those who are privileged? That was the question in regard to a survey done by the American Enterprise Institute and Opportunity America. As we know, the percentage of people getting married has decreased over recent years. And so what are the reasons behind it? Now, marriage has sharply declined among people without college degrees, while staying steady among college graduates with higher incomes. So just to give you the specific numbers, 26% of poor adults, 39% of working class adults, and 56% of middle and upper class adults ages 18 to 55 are married. So the number or the percentage is much lower for those who are living in poverty or struggling economically. Now, to compare, back in 1990, the numbers were very different. So in 1990, 51% of poor adults, 57% of working class adults, and 65% of middle and upper class adults were married. Now, one of the main reasons that respondents mentioned was that, when it comes to men who are struggling with their finances, who might not have good jobs, women are less likely to be interested in marrying them, and so that could be part of the reason. Also, just over half of adolescents in poor and working class homes live with both of their biological parents, compared with 77% in middle and upper class homes. So even though less people are getting married when it comes to a certain socioeconomic status, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're having less kids. Now, the overall birth rate in America has decreased slightly, but for the most part, birth rates have been steady.
Yeah. So that's a big number, a big difference. At 51% in 1990 of poor adults, which is the lowest 20th percentile in income, now only 26%, so cut in half, basically. And look, there's a couple of different factors, and it is interesting. One of the most interesting parts is that the poor economy can lead to a vicious cycle, which creates this. But once it sets into the culture, it then becomes really hard to reverse, which I actually think we don't necessarily have to reverse. The American Enterprise Institute is a conservative think tank. They might have partly done this study. I'm not doubting the results of the study, but they might have done this study to say, see, more people should get married. Not necessarily. Folks are right that if you go in the order that they, in the sequence of getting a degree first, then getting a job, then getting married, then having a baby, you're more likely to stay out of poverty and have higher income. But it's not necessarily a causation. It might be a correlation. And if you have a degree, of course you're more likely to have a better job. And if you're the kind of person who's stable enough to have those things, you might have a higher income. You might have been born into a situation where you're more likely to have a higher income, which allows you to get married and have an expensive wedding, etc. So I just think the trend is very real, but it might also have to do with our views about marriage overall, and that maybe we're not monogamous.
I think what Anna touched on regarding, women, obviously not being as interested in men who have no prospects, that's a very basic element to marriage. Usually that's a factor at some level of what this is. It should be for men also, theoretically. But I just imagine that income inequality, and that's what there's been a dramatic change in income inequality since 1990. The biggest drop here is, as Cenk said, half of it, a 25-point drop from 51 to 26. For working class adults, it's an 18-point drop, and for richer adults, it's just middle and upper class, it's just a 9% drop. So it's at the bottom end where the most significant decline is. And I just imagine that, again, if you're poor and you have no prospects, then getting married and starting a life together and having a family together, that also feels you might have prospects, but you don't feel like you have any. I imagine that's a definite impediment, and I think as long as there is this gap in income inequality, that there will be social consequences to that, and this is probably, or a good bet, I don't know, a good bet this is one of those consequences.
Yeah. It was pretty straightforward. I mean, I guess I would also argue that the centrality of like a white wedding and the cost of that wedding is also a deterrent to folks wanting to get married, and the increase of cohabitation. And also, a lot of folks with college degrees are also poor. So, so there's a lot of things that need to be unpacked in terms of how they kind of collected this data, and I expect that there's also differences across race in terms of some of the cultural elements that kind of contribute to folks getting married earlier or later and across certain socioeconomic statuses.
So one cultural issue is, for example, Mormons get married earlier, generally speaking, and so those are among the factors not considered in the study. But look, that's why I think the right-wing view of the world is often comical, black and white. No, it's a matter of morality, right? No, of course, socioeconomic conditions play into these overall trends that we're seeing in the country. If socioeconomic conditions didn't play a role, then why isn't the marriage rate consistent throughout all the different classes? And it's not.
Right.
It depends on your, as Ben just pointed out, all the numbers, and Anna did too. It's a huge difference if you're poorer as opposed to if you have more money. And then culture does matter, but that's where I disagree with conservatives. And so I said, a lot of you won't remember this, but there was this huge scandal when TV show Murphy Brown had a female character have a child out of wedlock.
Murphy Brown.
Yeah, and it was like, oh, I can't believe she did it and stuff. And Dan Quayle spoke out against it and said it was going to have a cultural effect. I agreed with conservatives that it was going to have a cultural effect. I disagreed with them that it was a bad thing, right? And I think overall we as a culture are beginning to say, I don't know that we need marriage, and so.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the numbers do bear out the fact that if you're married and you have a child, you're more likely to stay together. It's not a guarantee, obviously. A lot of couples with kids divorce all the time, but you're more likely to stay together, and that child is more likely to be raised in a household with both of his or her biological parents. And I think that's important. I think that's important because I mean it's difficult for single mothers to make ends meet, and I think that certain necessities to create a good foundation for that kid are compromised as a result of that. Now, I'm making generalizations, so I just want to be clear. Just because you're a single mom doesn't mean that you're not able to provide. There are lots of single moms that are doing a great job, but we know how expensive education is. We know how difficult it is considering wages being stagnant. So having a dual income household is important for these kids.
I just feel like we're trying to hold on to the horse and buggy. Right now, in this window of time, if you're married and you got both biological parents, you're statistically more likely to be better off. But eventually the culture will shift and adjust, and we might find a new way of cohabitating that still makes sure that the kids are all right and that the income levels are not affected. And we haven't yet, so we're in this middle ground now where marriage is disintegrating and we don't have a great second answer. But it doesn't mean that we just hold on to marriage for dear life.
I know, but if you're here's what I don't get. If you're gonna cohabitate and raise a child together, I mean, why not get married and get that sweet tax? Like you get a tax cut.
I know, but that's why the government getting involved in that is preposterous. You're encouraging marriage, and I just don't think that that's necessarily the right answer going forward.
It's a big change. It's not worth fighting it. I mean, so I would say, yeah, it might happen, but it's not going to happen as fast as you think. Nothing happens as fast as you think. So, like marriage is
wrong about timing.
Yeah, you're probably right, but you're right like 5 generations from now. So it's important that marriage. There's a value in staying married for kids. If you don't have kids, get out now.
I don't know that I go that far.
But if you do have kids, like if we're going to make a change, it shouldn't just be strengthening marriage. I mean, everybody. You have kids?
I don't. That's why I was thinking about.
So, like, I could remember, like we could use. We need a third person. Like a mom and dad. Like there should be. I mean,
liberals.
Yeah. I mean, 2 dads, another mom. But if we didn't have a kid, I'm pretty sure my wife would have left me last night.
All right, we got to go, guys. But we are going to come back for the online audience, so stay with us at tytnetwork.com, and we'll get some amazing stories for you guys, including great guys in the military. right, Turks. We've got a couple more stories for you guys. I love these stories. That's why I want to come back and make sure to give it to you. All right, Anna, go for it.
All right. The head of the Air Force Academy has addressed the fact that African American members of the Academy were unfortunately confronted with racial slurs written on message boards toward them. And so Lieutenant General Jay Silveria responded to that, and he addressed these cadets, and here's what he had to say. Okay, so he said that if you're outraged by those words, then you're in the right place. You should be outraged not only as airmen, but as a human being. If you can't treat someone from another gender, whether it's a man or a woman, with dignity and respect, then you need to get out. If you demean someone in any way, then you need to get out. And if you can't treat someone from another race or a different skin color with dignity and respect, then you need to get out.
We have it.
You're outraged by those words, then you're in the right place. You should be outraged not only as an airman, but as a human being. If you can't teach someone from another gender, whether that's a man or a woman, with dignity and respect, then you need to get out. If you demean someone in any way, then you need to get out. And if you can't treat someone from another race or a different color skin with dignity and respect, then you need to get out. I would be naive, and we would all be naive to think that everything is perfect here. We would be naive to think that we shouldn't discuss this topic. We would also be tone deaf not to think about the backdrop of what's going on in our country. Things like Charlottesville and Ferguson, the protests in the NFL.
Who doesn't love Lieutenant General Jay Silveria? Well, I probably have an answer for that. But the alt-right guys, etc., that loved Charlottesville, well, that's a Lieutenant General there, so I assume you're saluting, right? It's actually so easy, and it's such common sense. And basically what he's saying is, I got cadets here who are white, black, Latino, etc. We're all fighting together in the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. This is not complicated. This is not remotely hard. Of course,
to be a team.
Yeah, of course we're going to respect one another. You're going to pick on our forces, our guys who signed up to possibly give their lives for this country, and you're going to insult them that way, and you didn't think I was going to stand up for them? Come on. And this guy's fantastic. It's the only thing that's a shame is that speech seems extraordinary today, when it should be perfectly ordinary.
I love it, man. Because of the strength of it, in a world where we're diluting messages right and left, and, well-meaning NFL players are talking about linking arms and therefore massively diluting the intent of a righteous protest that Colin Kaepernick started, and NFL owners are one of whom at least has given $1 million to Donald Trump, saying that he's linking. He's on the wrong side of this. And here it is, as you say, Cenk, so simple. Like he didn't just say there's no place for it. He said, if you think it, get out. Mm-hmm. I don't want you here. Get out. I loved it. That was bold and great.
And thinking about why it's important militarily too. If you're not going to defend your fellow, Air Force cadet because of the color of their skin or for any other reason, well, then we can't rely on you. We can't trust you. You're going to let them down in the battlefield. I mean, that's exactly the kind of division that our enemies would love. If you're going to have a strong military, remember this is the Air Force, but remember the Army slogan was an army of one. The whole point of that is we're better together. Again, this should be elementary, but in this day and age, people would be mad at him for pointing out Ferguson and the NFL and saying like, oh, now you want to have blacks have the same rights and not have the police abuse them or shoot at them when they're unarmed. Of course they should have the same rights. Of course they should be protected just like everyone else. That's what the whole point of the country is.
Yeah, I guess, I thought it was a great speech. As someone whose husband went to this Air Force Academy, we were really into this story. I think the question now is, how do you operationalize this impassioned speech, right? Where does it go? They're not going to get out. They came here. right? They're not going to leave. So how do we investigate this thoroughly? How do we find the folks who kind of perpetuated this? And then how do we punish them? Because although it may not be illegal, the military has its own set of guidelines, right, that these folks need to be brought to justice in whatever form that the Academy would deem appropriate. And I just think this is particularly interesting in the context of a national conversation about the patriotism of Black folks. So how could you expect Black people to serve, right, when you haven't rooted out racism in the military? I just think it's an interesting conversation that Trump should be having. He should be outraged by this and not necessarily, folks taking a knee.
He'll be outraged, but if he responds to this in any way or is made aware of it, I imagine he'll be outraged in the other way. That here was this guy expressing some degree of outrage at Trump's behavior, right? And a degree of sympathy and understanding for what happened in Charlottesville, what happened in Ferguson, mentioning Ferguson, and the NFL, protests in the NFL. That wasn't saying we've got guys disrespecting the flag and disrespecting us in the NFL. That was him saying we got an issue here where we have people taking a stand for a right that they believe in the NFL, and we're condemning them. I think he's on the right side of every single issue.
Yeah, and what he's saying here is, to Ambria's point, look, you want everybody to salute the troops during the national anthem. Well, these are African Americans who are the troops. And I'm not going to let you come in here and insult them this way, degrade them this way. And if you really cared about the troops, you'd care a lot more about the horrible degradation and insults and threats that are going to actual troops than you would about whether somebody's exercising their freedom of speech in a ceremony of any sort. And that is inarguable.
All right, let's move on to a religious liberty story that I think is fascinating. A waitress is suing her former employer after she was essentially fired for refusing to wear denim pants because of her religion. Now, this is a Pentecostal woman who told her employer, hey, I'm not allowed to wear pants, so instead of wearing denim pants, can I wear a denim skirt? The employer didn't respond back to her, and then after her first day, just fired her. Now, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission announced that it has sued Georgia Blue LLC, which has restaurants selling Southern and Creole food in 4 Mississippi cities. The federal lawsuit said that the Mississippi-based company failed to reasonably accommodate the religious beliefs of Katoya Watkins, who told a Georgia Blue manager that her religion prohibits her from wearing pants. And so I think this is, I think it's a pretty clear case. Just let her wear the skirt. Like, who cares about your stupid dress code?
I know, but they care. I don't think it's that clear. I think this is a really interesting issue.
I think it's super clear, okay? She is not a doctor who says that she doesn't want to wear latex gloves because it's against her religion. She's a waitress, okay? It's not, her wearing a denim skirt. First of all, no one's going to notice and no one's going to care. No one's going to go to that restaurant and say, you know what? Everyone is wearing this uniform except for that one woman. She's wearing a skirt instead of pants. Who cares? Who cares? It's not that important.
They care.
They care, and they think that is... that's part of their...
This isn't a Hooters.
Right,
right. No one's going to come in expecting
a particular... Again, if the people who run a restaurant, you're allowed when you run a restaurant to make your staff wear a uniform, right?
Right.
So we acknowledge that, right? That they can have you wear a uniform. I mean, it's a little crazy that here a woman wants to wear a skirt and that we're having a backwards argument here, which amuses me. But yeah, I mean, Cenk's right. They do care, and it doesn't matter whether they're right about whether it really is something worth caring about. Sure. They've designed a style to their restaurant in a way they want their restaurant to be, and they want, for some reason, they want all their wait staff walking around in jeans.
I would argue that religious liberty in this case is much more important than your dress code. Right? Like, your dress code, you got to do cost-benefit analysis, like, weigh the issue. And in this case, I believe that her religious beliefs are more important than your stupid little dress code.
Yeah, and by the way, that even though they wouldn't quite phrase it that way, the courts do actually do a balancing test oftentimes.
Yeah.
And so you're technically correct that they would, and they might come out on the side that you're on. So, but lots of twists and turns. I think Pentecostal religion is nuts, but I think all the religions are nuts. And so I know you.
No. This was beside the point. If she's Pentecostal, she was wearing a skirt at the interview, right? Like, they're consistent. She got hired and then fired a day later. I don't know that they could have saved themselves a lawsuit, but I mean, they probably got sued for failing to hire her because of her dress code. But this just seems ridiculous and completely avoidable.
It does seem ridiculous and avoidable.
So look, I think why do you have to wear a skirt? Religions are so nuts. Okay, no, God wants you to wear a skirt.
I think it's not that you can't wear skirts; that you can't wear pants.
No, I know. That's what I'm saying.
There it is.
No, that you have to wear a skirt. God's like, you got a woman wearing pants. Man, that wrong Fashion Week statement. Okay, you're not making it into heaven. Insane. Okay, anyway.
It's such a critique of the religion.
I know. I'm starting out with that. Like, I don't agree with her religion at all. Okay? Having said that, I love that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission protects religious beliefs because I'm an American. And as agnostic as I am, I believe in the First Amendment, and I believe your religion should be protected. Mm-hmm. So the question is, where do you draw the lines? Because to Ambria's point, if you're working at Hooters and you come in as a Muslim and say, I'd like to wear a burqa, I can't. No, that's not what we do at Hooters.
But exactly, and that's their business model. It is a fundamental component of their business model. Hooters, it's in the name. Okay, so they want the titties, right? So
Georgia blue. I think it's blue. I mean, I do. I think it's blue jeans, right? Georgia blue.
Okay, but you can wear a denim skirt,
right? It's an iteration of denim.
It is an iteration. And it is pretty stupid. This is pretty stupid.
And so long as it doesn't interfere with her ability to be, she's not a FedEx driver. She's not. It's purely aesthetic, which I feel like is also problematic, right?
Yeah. I mean, whatever. Restaurants have that. Like, every restaurant has their dress code, but you're right, it's purely aesthetic, and so if it's not interfering with her ability to do her job and do it well, then I feel like it's not important, right? So I'll give you a comparison where I think, religious liberty, it's weighed differently. So we've talked about this before, like a Muslim cashier at a grocery store who doesn't want to handle pork. Well, you're working at a grocery store, homeboy or homegirl. Like, sorry, like, you're gonna have to handle pork. You're gonna have to handle.
It's part and parcel of your job.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I was going to use the same example. So that I think is clearly on the side of no, then you can't do this job. Mm-hmm. And then there's cases that I think are equally clear. McDonald's allowing a yarmulke under their whatever thing that they're wearing these days, or even a Muslim headdress. That doesn't really interfere with the uniform that much. Rastafarian, it's still fine, but you can put it in a net if you're working in food.
Right.
So I think those cases are clear. That's why I think there's an interesting case, because it's kind of in the middle. Mm-hmm. But if we were all judges here, you guys might convince me that it's on the side of yarmulkes under your hat as opposed to.
If we apply the touchdown rule, which is what Cenk and I like, just let Cenk and I decide in the NFL whether it's a catch or not, because we can tell. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's a ground. We're like, I know, come on, man, he caught it. He caught it. Yeah. Stop quibbling here. I don't know what he may have moved. He caught it.
To offer that.
So they should. So if you let us apply for all four of us apply that rule. The rule would be, for the love of God, let her wear the skirt.
Yeah, let her wear the skirt. Let's move on.
That's what the just thing is. I just mean the restaurant, it gets to make their cockamamie rules. I would like it if there were 7 other restaurants on that strip and she could just go work at Bennigan's and get the same amount of money. But if this is a job she wants, and then I'm probably going to come around to, it's crazy that you can't wear jeans. On its face, crazy. Your religion is crazy, and I would include that in my judicial argument. And then I tell him to let her wear the skirt.
Okay.
All right, last story.
All right. A megachurch pastor is apologizing for his wife's behavior on social media after she received a considerable amount of criticism for talking smack about those who have been protesting by kneeling during the national anthem. Hope Carpenter was the name of the woman who posted on Facebook, and here's what she wrote. She said, "This will not fix racism. Duh. Only Jesus. If you wanted, it's bad. Can we just stop for a second? Only Jesus.
Not just only Jesus.
Yeah.
Duh.
Duh.
Only Jesus.
So, look, I don't know what she sounds like, and I feel like it's unfair for me to read it the way that I think that she sounds.
Oh, I think it's fair.
Okay, fine, then I'm going to do it.
Do it, please.
All right, let's put the graphic back up. This will not fix racism. Duh. Only Jesus. If you want to kneel, then you better be praying to the one and only who can heal our land.
Ooh, I thought you were going to go more southern.
I thought you were going to go more southern.
Oh, no, she sounds like an airhead. Like, that's what she sounds like to me. But that's the way I read it. I don't know what she really sounds like.
She is actually from South Carolina, so you were allowed to go more southern there.
Yeah. So she also says black athletes, she said, should stop thinking about it from your own history or race and admit that our country is not yo blame to blame. Okay, anyway, so they got a bunch of heat for that.
So which country is to blame for the racism of blacks in America?
And whose country is she referring to?
Who are we going to hook that one on
Our
to?
country.
Yeah, right.
Mexico, obviously.
God, why are these people so incredibly sensitive? It's amazing. It's amazing.
We're about to get to, I think, an excellent apology, if you ask me. Okay? So, all right, we might disagree on that too, but I'm going to disagree even on the front part. Not disagree, but look, the first quote, I actually don't have a problem with. The second quote, I have a huge problem with. The first quote is, this will not fix racism. Now, I don't agree with that at all, but a lot of people think that, you're kneeling or a protest doesn't fix anything. People say that all the time on all sides of the
You know why
spectrum.
they say that? Because they don't want any form of protest. They just want them to shut up and not ever complain about, the unfair, unequal treatment that their community deals with.
Yeah, I hear you. And then she says only Jesus is going to fix things. But they run a mega church. They think Jesus fixes everything. You got a flat tire? Jesus. Right? You got pickles in your sandwich when you didn't ask for them? Jesus. Right? So I don't agree with that. I think it's comical. But they run a mega church. Right? Now the real issue is when she says, you should stop thinking about just your history or race. I mean, that is rich with irony. So here are folks saying we are disproportionately shot and killed by police, and you're telling me that that's not a problem, but that me pointing it out is the problem. And there's some chance that you're only thinking about it from your history or your race. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand, but the second quote is terrible from her.
Yeah, I hate both of them. And just to go back to the whole Jesus will fix everything, like, what do they think that looks like? Like, do they envision that Jesus, like, let's say they genuinely believe in that religion, right? That God or Jesus is going to come, and do they think he's just going to show up one day, like, be like, yo, everyone, racism, God?
Well, I think
I think it's a lazy argument that Christians use, typically evangelicals use, to keep them from having to critically engage the gospel, right? Which would mean that racism is a sin, and that you need to check your church and check your own heart and address it. And I think particularly in this climate, with all of these incidents of racial injustice cropping up, that churches have to confront it. And they're not, and they're falling short. So I don't think that they believe Jesus. I mean, I think real Christians believe that Jesus is operating, right, and that he's a part of reconciliation, but that he's not going to fix it. And that if you are a Christian and Jesus is working through you, you got to fix it, right?
Well, I mean, so that leads to two other things. And again, that's why I think religions are comical. But okay, let's go down this path of where is Jesus? Well, if Jesus is in us and he's in the middle of fixing it, maybe he's making them kneel.
Right.
Right? So, or if Jesus actually came down and said, hey, cops, stop shooting black people more than white people when they're unarmed. You know what they say? It's commie. Right? They'd reject them. In fact, there is a Jewish carpenter right now who's saying, please stop shooting them, and it's unfair. His name is Bernie Sanders. And he was, by the way, literally a carpenter at one point. Yes. Okay.
Wow.
And
where'd the long buried word?
It'd be so awesome if he was like my grandpa and he helped me remodel the condo. Anyway, that's hilarious.
And when they hear a guy saying, hey, let's be decent to one another, let's take care of each other and treat each other equal, they're like, nah, not really. So I agree with you on that they're not exactly on point on their gospel.
I think Avery makes a really great point because, sometimes some people will proudly say that they use religion as a crutch because it helps them when they're wounded and emotionally wounded and it gets them through difficult times. And then pejoratively people will say you're using religion as a crutch. But here they're definitely using it as a crutch and in the negative way. Now, because I think to some extent, Anna, they do believe that Jesus will fix everything, and that's part of being religious. That's part of having faith, and that's okay. But where the great point that Ambria makes is that now they're using it to avoid having a conversation about the very thing that Jesus would, at a bare minimum, I think he'd at least talk about it. I don't think Jesus would be like, get up off your knees and stand for the anthem. Jesus would, I think, be... I mean, I think he'd be like, well, why is everybody getting up? Like, to salute what? Like, to salute God? Oh, right. Oh, no. Oh, to salute a flag of a country? That I'm just guessing that that would make him uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
I think he might think that was a false idol.
But the government executed you.
So falling back and then using religion as a cudgel? No. To batter people into not having the conversation, that's where it's inappropriate. And I'm so glad you said it, because now I'm going to steal that and use it, because that really happens all the time.
Well, Jesus would be opposed to you stealing it. But remember what Jesus did.
Borrowing it, I'll give it back.
Right. Jesus went into the temple and threw out the money changers. What did he do? He challenged the established order to seek justice. So if you actually believed it, you'd be a lot more in the camp of hey, let's talk about these things and let's bring about change. Okay, but finally, let's get to the apology, because so she didn't do it, so I'm not giving her any credit. She's apparently distraught and emotionally wrecked after the criticism she received online. But her husband, Ron Carpenter, came out and said, "It's been tough." He said, "the things that have been said about us, but maybe we deserved it. Maybe this is a learning moment for us. So I'm not going to tell you to be quiet. I'm going to tell you to teach me." And he went on to say, "We ask you to forgive us if we've hurt you in any way. I ask you to teach me what I don't know. I don't want to be ignorant." I just think that's an excellent apology.
That's a 10.
We agree.
On the Mankiewicz apology scale.
Yeah.
That's as good as it gets.
I mean, here we were just a second ago talking about, well, no. If you were a Christian who read the Gospels, you would talk about educating yourself and actually getting involved, and then that's how Jesus acts through you. And boom, Ron Carpenter says, yes, that's the direction I want to go. And it's not a thing like, if you, like most of the apologies, if you were offended, I guess you're a snowflake, but whatever, right? This is, no. I get that you were hurt by this, and I don't want that to happen. I want to help understand where you're coming from so we can work on this together. I think that's just perfect.
I would just like, before we go, I drew this today, and I don't know totally, I don't know 100% what it is, but I feel like if you see this person anywhere, you should call the police, because whatever it is,
it's the mouth.
Whatever this person is accused of doing, they did it.
Gay scratched out in the corner of the big shirt.
Well, I seem to have written the words Ben, and then apparently above it, I appear to have written the word gay.
And then
scratched it out. But I was going to make a point about, who knows what I was going to make, but anyway, ignore the writing and focus solely on the photo. There we go.
Okay.
That's
two things on that.
Guilty.
One, she or he literally looks like the couple that ate people that was in the news recently.
That's right. Yeah, the cannibals. Yeah.
So yes, they are. So
in Russia.
And that's a hoax.
No, right, sorry.
Okay, and second of all, definitely take that to your therapist.
I don't.
You don't know what?
Just what's happening. So
all right, guys, have a great weekend. Join TYT, TYTnetwork.com/join.
Stop holding it up,
and go to shoptyt.com, and we will have a shirt with that person's face on it too. Okay, anyway, all right, here we go. Bye-bye.